Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much for investing your time with us this evening. I'm Chitra Mukherjee, and I'm moderator for today's discussion on Circular Economy 101. I'm delighted on behalf of Team Chintan and our partners, Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, to welcome all of you to committed to the values of democracy and social justice. With this webinar series, Chintan and FES would like to create a nuanced and progressive discourse for social, economic, and ecological transformation with gender justice and climate justice as its core. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed deep inequality in our society, and the sudden pause in economic activity looks like a natural design to restore our ecology and a chance to think afresh our future course. Many of you are familiar with the work Chintan has been doing in the last 2 decades. Through our various implementation projects on the ground across India, our policy work, we strive to reduce waste and unsustainable consumption and enable better management of that waste which is generated. At Chintan, while dirtying our hands in waste for 20 years, we have seen a level of unacceptable consumption in our society. Waste also reflects inequality in consumption. We need to run our lives in ways that reduce consumption, production, and extraction of natural resources. We also need to adapt to ways where everyone has access to the basic needs of the remaining resources on Earth. We strongly feel that circular economy is the answer. It's the way to go ahead. It recognizes waste as a secondary raw material and reduces constant extraction of natural resources. It also calls for an end to the use and throw, allowing durable and upgradable products and boosting the repair and restoration economy. Circular economy imbibes community behavior where one product can be shared by many. So today's webinar is a part of our 6th webinar series and will introduce you to the basic concepts of circular economy, the need to make the all-important switch from linear to the circular model. So whether you are a researcher, a student, a homemaker, a policymaker, part of the industry, our goal today is that you will come away with something, a new idea, a fresh perspective, a new strategy that you can apply in your everyday life, your business, your career. So the format for today's session is we have 4 panelists, and I'm going to invite each and every one of them to speak to give a short presentation for about 15 minutes, and then we'll throw open the floor to give you an opportunity to ask specific questions that you have been thinking about to help you understand circular economy. So let me start with the panel introductions. We have an amazing panel today. Our first panelist for the evening is Dr. Manveer Sodhi, who is the professor of Industrial and Manufacturing Engineering in the Department of Mechanical, Industrial and Systems Engineering at the University of Rhode Island. His research on recycling, reverse logistics, and sustainable product design has been funded by the National Science Foundation of the US. For over a decade, he has hosted the global product sustainability meetings in Rhode Island. I would like to invite Dr. Sodhi to share his perspectives on planning circular economy and present us with a few global implementation case studies. Over to you, Dr. Sodhi.
Thank you, Chitra. Let me get my screen set up and then let me see, how do I do this? Alt tab. So, yep, just a second. I just need to share the screen. Can you see my screen now? Chitra? Hello?
No, we can't see your screen. Samuel, if you could please unmute yourself.
Yeah, we can't see your screen.
Okay, let me do this again.
We are.
No, it'll be up.
It takes some time, so it's totally fine. It takes some time.
Okay. I don't want to show you these things.
Your screen is visible, Professor Sodhi, Dr. Sodhi.
Yeah, there's something. Yep, I think I can do this now. Share screen, and it's there. So, Chintan. Right. So you should be able to see some. I'm not sure if you can see it in presentation mode, but let me try it. Now, can you see it?
Yeah, we can see your screen, Dr. Sodhi.
Great,
Yeah.
wonderful. All right. Thank you, Chitra. Thank you, Samuel. Thank you to my fellow panelists and to the audience. This is really a very, very important topic for India and for the rest of the world, and I'm honored to be a speaker on this panel. But roughly, let me say what I'm going to present, and then of course, later we'll have discussions on this. So this today is the Circular Economy 101, which means I'd like to introduce some basic ideas about the circular economy. We're not going to get into any advanced models. We're not going to talk about the technical details, but more from an intuitive perspective, what does a circular economy mean, and what does it have to do with economic growth, and how it could possibly be channeled in a way that could be used effectively for India's growing economy. So the traditional approach, which has been in force for the longest time, has been a take, make, dispose approach, where you take what you need from the ground or from the environment, you make what you want of it, and then when you're done with it, you dispose it. That has worked well. That has worked for a long time.
To answer this question, I will fall back on a quotation from Kirti Shah, who thought of this magic number.
So we have I assume that has nothing to do with this presentation, but if it does, please explain it, and I'll be happy to answer it. But in general, I'll answer all questions at the end of the seminar. So the take, make, dispose approach is a linear model. And in a linear economy, you start exactly as I pointed out earlier. There are a number of stages that we go through, and this constitutes our economic activity. A good part of our economic activity is in different phases of this supply chain and production loop. Then we go to the circular economy, and in the circular economy, what you have is the first few steps are the same, where you get the materials, you produce them, you have a service provider that gives the user the materials, products, and then of course they can be collected, they can be disposed, and in some cases some energy can be recovered, but the recovery is not very intense. However, there are loops within this that are unique to a circular economy. One is that the life of a product can be extended by repair. So that's a possible economic gain. The maintenance of existing products can be done in a way that allows the extension of a product's lifetime. And Industry 4.0, for example, is based on data collection to enable these kinds of activities. Energy recovery, to some extent, collection is a very important part of both circular. In circular economy, it becomes even more important, but the reuse, redistribution of products is also a very important feature. And then, of course, we have the recycling, and the recycling is more towards component and material recovery. So the focus of circular economies is energy efficiency, material recovery, component reuse, and recovery. And here I have some acronyms. DFE is designed for environment. DFR is designed for recycling or designed for disassembly. These are approaches that can be carried out. These are activities that can be carried out prior to the production of a product and can aid considerably in the circular loop. We talk about zero waste manufacturing, and that could be a possibility. It gets hard, but it has to be done. Reduction of industrial pollution, and we'd like to talk about new business models for using products. So tools for planning in circular economies. Let's talk about some of the new tools. So the tools are for repair, for example, you can have design for repair. It's possible for those that are in mechanical engineering or production engineering or most engineering programs, they will understand that you do design and you have some design objectives. It is possible to add a secondary or even a primary goal, which is design for repair. We have gone away from that for many reasons, but India is an economy where such an objective would be certainly feasible. And some of these could be extended guarantees. They could be modular design. So these are all add-ons to circular economy tools. The additional corporate level tools that one can think of are condition monitoring, IoT, that's Internet of Things, smart monitoring, maintenance management. So some of these are where the use of a product or a machine is monitored and the data is reported. As I mentioned earlier, Industry 4.0 is a fairly important development in industry, and it assumes that this kind of data will be collected and acted on. Then we have the reuse, redistribution, and at the corporate level tools, you have design for disassembly, careful disassembly, refurbishment tools, but these are all I'd say strategic tools. And at the recycle level, the service, you need to have service operators, you need to have bulk recycling, material mixes. What this means is when you have a large number of products and you'd like to recover some value from them, you need to have a way of understanding how you can recover some value. And this planning is far more difficult than the planning of sending products out to the consumer. So in the linear economy, you plan the forward supply chain where the material goes from a manufacturer to a distributor to a consumer. In the reverse economy, now you're trying to take materials back and try to take them back in such a way that you can recover some value. This is difficult. So not only is the value of the material less, but the problems are significantly more complicated. And how do we address them? So for the circular economy, the input phase is the indicators. People in industrial engineers, there's a saying that what you cannot measure, you cannot improve. So there must be some metrics that are shared and monitored. So you can monitor the percentage virgin metal recovered, virgin metal used, the recycled and reused components. In the use phase, you can talk about the lifetime of a product. So we know that in the US, for example, during the pandemic, many people have started using their washing machines and their dryers much more than they were using them. And they find that they are failing much more than they were in the past. That's related to the lifetime, the design lifetime of a product. So these are some of the indicators. End of life, we have landfill energy recovery, the percentage of products reused, and then of course the efficiency of recycling, which should be the amount of materials recovered. I plan to talk about some eco-industrial parks, but I think the more important contrast is a comparison of the Chinese and Western approach to the circular economy. Now, China has gone in for a circular economy in a big way. They've made it a part of their annual goals. And what they've said is this, so let's contrast the two thoughts. So the Timmermans in 2000, this is the European Union statement, was that we cannot, the European Union, and actually even the West, being the developed countries such as the US and to some extent Australia, it says we cannot compete on wage costs. We cannot compete on cheap natural resources as other parts of the world could. But with resource efficiency and leadership in green technologies and modern waste management, we can build a competitive edge, generate new business opportunities, and create jobs. That's the Western approach, and it's about 5 years old, but it's still relevant. On the other side, so the Chinese have come up with the following statement, which says, since the 80s of the last century, the amount of material resources used have created great environmental costs. And so in the future, they would like to change the economic growth model and not have such a high environmental cost. So they are interested in reducing the environmental consequence of production, but they're also looking at it mostly as environmental remediation or alleviation, and not necessarily material recovery. So the Europeans' approach is, or the Western approach is for trying to get a product-based approach for boosting circular economies with initiatives for managing demand and material recovery. So this brings us to the other question: what about the people? So far, everything we've talked about, the goal of manufacturing, etc., has been to try and reduce people's involvement to as much as possible. But in 1930, Keynes predicted or theorized that in the future, the means of economizing the use of labor is outrunning the pace at which we can find new uses of labor. What he meant was that with mechanization, and he foresaw this in 1930, that mechanization, automation would take over production, and we would have to find new uses for labor if we wanted to use and pay for labor with the old models. So in the circular economy, the role of the people is, of course, this is our linear economy. We are springing off from that. The repair can be done by repair persons. That's, and again, I recall growing up in India, and if your radio broke down, you didn't throw it away. You had it repaired, and there was a guy sitting in his shop who'd repair it. Now, I'm not saying it's better to have a radio that doesn't break down, but it doesn't make sense that if a small glitch in the radio happens, that you throw the entire radio away. Of course, now that would be your phone or some more expensive device. Maintenance, of course, there are maintenance techs, service techs, support staff. There's a lot of this kind of activity, and it needs to be supported by people. At the end, at least for now, machines don't repair themselves, or equipment does not repair itself. In the reuse, redistribute phase, we are talking about people. And when I've got a red label, it really refers to an informal economy. And I'll discuss this in more detail later. But this is where the informal economy can come in and provide a readily available pool of labor. And labor being not just unskilled labor, but also in time their skills get upgraded. So they become skilled refurbishers, they become transporters, collectors. And so this is certainly a part of the circular economy. And then, and of course, in the recycle phase, there's a lot of effort required. The amount of effort required is at levels that most Western countries are trying to mechanize. But in India, it's possible to do this right off the bat with the amount of with the size of the informal economy. So the informal sector can provide a really large group of resources for improving the circular economy. And again, let's go back to the idea. The idea is that we do not want to dispose of products when their first life has ended. Their first life being the time when the consumer picks it up and returns it and is done with her use of the product. We'd like to reuse the product, either reuse its components or reuse its materials. And here's a case in point. Currently in the US, there's a big thrust on battery electric vehicles or just electric vehicles. Along with the development of electric vehicles, there's been an emerging industry for the recycling of batteries. So this is the equivalent of saying that when Ford started making his cars, he also started making facilities for disassembling cars and recovering the material. If he had done that, we would have used far less material if automakers had done that. But what is happening with the electric vehicle industry is that this is happening at the same time. And a good percentage of the materials required for electric vehicles and batteries especially, they're expensive materials, and the producers have identified this opportunity now where they're recovering the expensive materials like cobalt, nickel, etc. And it is feeding the forward supply chain right from the start when the electric vehicle market is burgeoning. So the challenges for CEs there are several challenges from the West and from India, etc. But the challenges are, how do you influence consumer behavior? And that's a bigger challenge for society. You must engage your consumers. Engaging the community is key for any effort. There has to be a shared vision of how this works. And that could be education or the seminars like Chintan has organized. These are important. And there are many other ways of doing it. But the role of the informal sector, I must highlight that again. India has the labor to address the consequences of its consumption appetite. The informal sector can be leveraged in a win-win partnership, and some support that would be useful is material separation by communities. You must exploit the community effort to help you take apart materials. We do this now. We ask people to throw materials in recycling bins. We can do more. We can ask people to separate even more, provided designers give you the guidelines on how this can be done. We must have recycling mandates or community targets. There must be facilities for community recycling. There should be requirements for recycled material usage. Some of these will be community level mandates, some could be government level mandates. And then of course, there must be incentives for employment in the informal sector. So that is, from my perspective, the basics of how the consumer economy, the circular economy works. Later, or depending on the moderator's schedule, we can take questions as directed.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Sodhi. That was a very insightful presentation, and it gave us a very good understanding of the linear and the circular models, and also the challenges that we are facing in implementing circular economy, influencing consumer behavior and all of that. And I think one of the most important things is that that you raised was that mechanization is taking over everything. But in India, with its size of informal sector and a readily available pool of labor, we have people like mochis and repairers and refurbishers, and they should be the center of the solutions. And of course, informal economy can provide a very large group of resources. So I think that was very interesting. Thank you so much. And I will now welcome our next panelist, Dr. Kuldeep Sangwan. Dr. Kuldeep Sangwan is a professor of mechanical engineering at BITS Pilani. He has been involved in teaching courses in the area of manufacturing, engineering, and management. And he's a recipient of prestigious Shri B.K. Birla and Srimati Sarla Birla Chair Professorship in 2019. His current research interests are in the area of sustainable manufacturing, smart manufacturing, circular economy, life cycle engineering, resource efficiency, and the application of artificial intelligence in manufacturing. So I would like to now welcome Dr. Sangwan for his presentation. Over to you, Dr. Sangwan.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Dr. Sangwan, we can hear you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Chitra. First of all, thanks, Chintan, for providing this opportunity to share my thoughts on a topic which is very close to my heart. So of course I do research in this area, but research is more technical things. And here we are discussing with an audience who can actually make a difference in the awareness on sustainability issues. So first of all, can manufacturing be sustainable? So as Dr. Sodhi has told, that the two important aspects of circular economy are production and supply chain. So can manufacturing be sustainable? Let's ask this question. So what are the challenges to sustainability in industry, and what drives sustainability, and how the challenges can be mitigated using circular economy, and what is the difference between linear and circular economy? So first question, can manufacturing be sustainable? Of course, everybody knows manufacturing is an input-output process. On the left side, you require the input in terms of the energy or the material, two important things, and which both requires fossil fuel. And output is the emission and waste, and of course, useful product. So as a sustainable manufacturing can't be sustainable. So idea is to make it as good as possible. So what are the pressing challenges? Then we did a research, of course, that research is a little bit old, 2011-12. We went to the industry, we went to the government officials, we went to the experts, and we tried to find out what are the barriers to sustainability. And we divided these barriers into different perspectives. One of the context is the importance. So we got the high importance barriers, moderate importance barriers, and the low importance barriers. So as told, the uncertain benefits. So the benefits of sustainability are generally highly uncertain. Like we don't know what will be the quantitative benefit, and there is always a time lag. So that's just like maintenance. If you maintain your car properly, you don't see any advantage of that. But if you don't maintain your car properly, you will see the disadvantages very quickly. So the advantages, similarly, the sustainability advantages will come after a time, and it's very difficult to quantify. So it's difficult to get funding from the top leadership. Then lack of organizational resources. So here organization resources, human, manpower, as well as the funding. In fact, we'll see the later slides, there's a huge shortage of manpower which can handle sustainability issues. Then technology risk. So as Professor Sodhi has told, that the Europe is developing on two things. One is the technology and waste management. So newer technologies, of course, are generally expensive. So that is a high importance barrier. Then high short-term cost. Long-term cost of sustainability may not be very high. In fact, we may get the economical benefit, but in short term,
So sorry, Dr. Sangwan, it seems you've forgotten to switch on the screen share feature. So we haven't been able to see the PPT.
I think there is some problem. I have to. Okay, let me then log out and. Oh.
Yeah, Dr. Sangwan, we're able to see you now.
Oh, thank you very much.
And the PPT as well. Yeah, thanks a lot.
I was in a different sharing on a different mode, sharing same.
That's totally all right. Just at the outset, you have around 10 minutes.
Sure.
Great.
6. Then we have moderate importance barriers, which are the low enforcement of the law, not because of corruption, but because of the shortage of the manpower or shortage of the facilities, etc. Then uncertain future legislation. We know everything about what happened the last 10 years or so about our electrical vehicles and European Union laws or BS 4, 5, 6, 7. And we know in Europe, there are like European Union level stage 7, 8, but we are still struggling with the 5 to 6, 4 to 6 we are going. So legislation is a little bit uncertain. Then top management commitment is not there from the leader. Then on the other side, very low importance barriers are there. The public pressure is not there, low customer demand, lack of awareness, and weak legislation. So that is one thing when we ask the industry, government officials, and the experts about this. But that's not all. When we see the government perspective, industry perspective, expert perspective, that was the first one was the overall. Then when we divided them into different things. So for the sake of saving time, I can see that top are almost same: high short-term cost, uncertain future uncertain benefits, uncertain future legislation, technology, low risk. And very low importance is given by government, industry, as well as the expert is to the lack of awareness, weak legislation, lack of awareness, and uncertain future. So it's not important. But when you want to mitigate these barriers, you have to mitigate first the root barrier. So what is the root barrier? So there's another technology like interpretive structural modeling technique. So we use that modeling technique and we found that lack of awareness or lack of information is the root barrier. Unless you mitigate this lack of awareness among the industry, among the government official, and among the general public, other things, level 2 barriers can't be mitigated. Or other way, if you mitigate it, the others will be effectively mitigated. So this is very interesting thing which we generally observe every day in life, but we forget when we apply to the industry. For example, when we ask the students, why you are doing this course? Sir, I want A grade. What do you want? I want 100 marks, 90 marks, 90% marks or 95%. But remember, getting A grade is not that's maybe the objective, but you can't get A grade without hard working, without spending time, without putting efforts, without attending classes. So those are the basic things, root things. So here, that's why the NGOs and all those things, government officials, they play an important role to create the awareness and information. Other things want to be moving without lack of awareness, then the weak legislation, low public pressure, low customer love. Technology risk will come later on. So then we divided these challenges into like the barriers, like who can handle these barriers. So we've divided into 3. Either they can be termed as the policy barriers, which are generally affected by the government, or the internal barriers, which are internal to the industry and they can take care of, or the economic barriers, because everybody is working for the economy. And we did a hypothesis testing and we found that it's the internal barrier. Industry, they have to think inside first to get the policy barriers. Don't expect the government to act. So internal barriers, they affect the policy barriers, and internal barriers affects the economic barriers. And here we did not find any correlation between the policy and economic barriers. Then we compared those barriers from the Germany and Indian industry, and we found all barriers are same, of course using all statistical methods, except the one, the low enforcement of the legislation. That's the significantly different barrier. All other barriers are statistically same to the German and Indian industry. Then we also studied the drivers. That's what drives sustainability in industry. And similar to this, we divided that internal drivers, policy drivers, and economic drivers. But during the driving, we find during hypothesis testing that internal drivers, they drive the policy drivers and economic drivers, but policy drivers also drive the economic drivers, which was not there in the challenges. So remember the government, generally people think it's government. Government is not for, this government is for the people or for the industry. Their existence depends upon how the people react, how the industry react. So that is also proved here. Then we developed the ISM model also. Here also, like customer demand, public pressure, peer pressure. So that is the awareness category. That is the root drivers. They drive all other things. They drive the government to develop the better legislations. And that drives the future legislation and the supply chain pressure. External category, and then comes the organizational category, and finally the benefits are the output of the driver, and they are not the root drivers. Then difference between the Indian and Germany, I would like to show the difference, the three differences, like incentives. So one of the driver was the incentive. So it's a large difference between the German and the Indian industry. So generally the Indian industry that is driven by the government incentives, either in the tax brackets or subsidies of different economic nature. But in Germany, we found that the sustainability issues, they are driven by the competitiveness. Then in India, supply chain pressure was another significant difference. In India, because we export most of the parts, so we do it, the Indian companies, particularly the SMEs, because of the export requirement of the OEM, we implement sustainability issues, and not in the Germany, it's not like that. Then the public image, surprisingly, Indian government, Indian industry, they implement sustainability to improve the public image. And the German industry, they believe more in competitiveness and public image. And organizational resources, another factor where this is equal. Even in Germany, they don't have the people to implement. They also don't have the much fund on this. So this brings to me the sustainable supply chain. What is the outcome? So as Professor Sodhi has already told about that design level, what are the outputs of this sustainability? So it's maybe resource efficiency, energy consumption. So generally, what is the output? These outputs, why I wanted to show you, these outputs can be achieved by some other method also, no doubt about that. But if you go for circular economy, definitely you will get these benefits. Reduction in energy consumption, reduction in waste, material utilization, enhancing product durability, safety, reducing toxic dispersion, reducing health hazards, or consistently improving manufacturing quality, improving recycling, reuse, remanufacturing, and maximizing sustainable resources. So how these challenges can be addressed? So that's Professor Sodhi has already showed this MacArthur. So I got from the Robert Angelis professors at University of Dexter. So this is the traditional method, traditional supply chain, and this is circular supply chain. And more of this, that when we go for circular supply chain, like we go for repair loop or reuse loop, refurbish loop, as we move from the repair loop to recycle loop, it's a cascade use, more and more effect, exponential effects we get. So I won't just put on that. So this is your like circular economy, what Professor Sodhi told you, the forward supply chain and the backward supply chain. So this you can see the forward supply chain. This is backward supply chain. So the important parts of the backward supply chain are the disposal center, recycle center, and external suppliers. So let me focus on the other next this thing. So just, does it work? Okay. Okay, I hope you can see my full screen now. So forward supply and backward supply. So the three important aspects. Forward supply chain is much easier. We'll see in the next slide. In the backward supply chain, it's much difficult. because of many reasons. So the three important aspects of the backward supply chain or reverse logistics to complete the loop and make it circular economy is the collection, inspection and sorting, and product recovery. So in the collection, we have to take a decision. Those NGOs, those people who want to do some work. So here the decisions are location, allocation of the collection centers. Where should be the collection centers should be located, and what materials should be allocated to them, and what should be the method of collection, whether it's the third-party logistics or whether it's the OEM doing themselves or whether the retailers doing it. So when we do this, the various important key performance indicators are the collection cost, processing cost, value-added recovery, energy use, waste generation, production reclamation, level of social acceptability, customer satisfaction, and intellectual property right information. For example, if IPR is very high, then the government will, then the industry will do the collection themselves. They will not give it to the third-party logistics. Then method of collection can be the initial investment required, then return volume, then operating cost, then supply chain control, customer satisfaction, environmental impact, and health and safety issues. Then during the inspection and sorting, two types of decisions are required, whether to do the centralized inspection and sorting or to do the decentralized inspection and sorting. And third, what level of disassembly is to be done. So as Professor Sodhi has told, the design for disassembly is a very important aspect for circular economy. If you can't disassemble a product, then you can't remanufacture it, you can't refurbish it, you can't even recycle it in environment-friendly manner. So then the costing, testing cost will depend upon whether centralized or decentralized, product reliability requirement, availability of skilled labor, location of waste disposal sites, labor cost, volume of collection, waste handling, storage, and transportation cost. And degree of disassembly depend upon the value recovery, disassembly cost, processing cost, landfill cost, incineration cost. So for example, the electrical vehicle batteries. So there are many methods to dispose it of. They simply can burn out, which are generally Europeans, they are doing it because they don't have the labor. But then you don't get your recovery cost. Value recovery is not there at all. So depending upon the country, depending upon your local or regional conditions, you will have different type of location. And then finally, product recovery process, whether to use recycling, remanufacturing, refurbishing, or reuse, it depends upon the operational cost, the environmental impact, the market demand for the recycled or remanufactured or refurbished product, technical feasibility of doing a process, then green image, then value recovery, health and safety, employment generation opportunities. We should not forget in India, the employment generation opportunities. So how much we can, like if you recycle it, you employment generation opportunity are 10 times more than reuse, and level of national importance. Then last slide, I think it's 2 minutes extra. So there's a lot of difference between the forward logistic and so reverse logistics. Forward logistic is very clear. Packaging is uniform. It comes neat and clean from the Amazon or Flipkart. Product quality is uniform. You know what is going on. But when we return it, when we return our car, we don't know what is the quality. Depending upon the use also, same model, 2020 model. One 2020 model may be much worse than what is 2015 model of the car. So it's highly non-uniform. So a lot of challenges are there. The challenges are divided into either the quality challenges or the quantity of return challenges. So a lot of these challenges are there. So circular economy, that's all from my cycle for circular economy. So we are hosting 28th Self Conference on Life Cycle Engineering. It's first time in India during 10th to 12th March. So please join it. We have more than 150 research papers from each nook and corner of the world. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sangwan. That was an extremely interesting presentation. And can manufacturing be sustainable? What drives and inhibits sustainability in the industry? And how can we overcome it through circular economy? And from a supply chain perspective, you explained to us the differences between linear and circular economy. That was great. Thank you so much. I now welcome our third panelist, Swati Singh Sambyal. She's a waste management specialist who's associated with UN Habitat. Swati has led city-scale implementation projects in India and played advisory roles on sustainable resource management. She has worked across Africa, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh on projects related to environmental compliance, impact assessment, waste and wastewater management. And she's been a part of the National Geographic Forum on circular economy. Swati will be speaking on the journey of circular economy in India and cities that are aiming towards it, and what circularity from a developing country's perspective. So over to you, Swati.
Reason I can't share my video. Can Samuel give me the access?
Yeah, I've done that.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chitra, and thanks, Chintan, for organizing this very relevant webinar series. Without wasting any time, I think let me jumpstart with the presentation. Wonderful insights from Professor Sodhi and Professor Sangwan. I may skip a few points where I think there may be some similarities to ensure that time is not wasted. So as Chitra mentioned, I'll be focusing on where have we been in terms of circular economy in India and what should be the perspectives that circularity in developing countries must kind of relate to. Definitely it comes from a lot of field experience and a lot of work that over the years I've got a chance to do on the ground. When we talk about why we need circular and sustainable economy in India, of course, there are two very pertinent factors. One is when we look into resource extraction in India. Now, from this graph, what is clearly visible is that between 1970 and 2015, India registered a 6-fold increase in annual material consumption, right from 1.18 billion tons to 7 billion tons. And by 2030, annual material consumption will double to about 14.2 billion tons due to population growth, extensive urbanization, economic mobility, and various other factors. If we look at where we are in terms of current resource extraction, it's somewhere about 1580 tons per acre, which is 251% higher than the world's average resource extraction, which is about 450 tons per acre. So clearly extremely alarming. We're also the third largest emitter of greenhouse emissions and account for about 9.2% of total world emissions. And clearly we look into where we are in terms of resource recovery. I mean, though we say we're recycling 60%, but then the numbers are much lower. Given the fact that we do aspire to become a global manufacturing hub, we can't really sustain with our take, make, waste, linear economic approach, and it definitely needs a drastic shift. I'll be focusing more on the, waste material perspective, where we are in terms of numbers. I mean, clearly we look at the amount of municipal waste we generate, about 62 million tons per annum, plastic waste, biomedical waste, e-waste. We're, the 5th largest producer of e-waste worldwide. And of course, we may sort of slowly top the charts. But clearly, what we know is that these numbers are much more than the official data. I mean, due to lack of inventarization and other factors. We are also seeing a clear trend in increase in per capita waste generation in cities, where even small class 2 towns are generating waste to the tune of 1 kilogram per annum, and leave aside metropolitans that are somewhere between 1.5 to 2 kg per capita. So clearly, I mean, the numbers when we talk, when we relate to waste generation are increasing, and we only don't know that, what is collected and what is treated. About 75 to 80%, for instance, of municipal waste gets collected. only 22 to 28% of this is processed and treated. And waste generation, as we know, is clearly, will increase. If we look at the official data, from 2031 to 2050, we'll go to somewhere about 436 million tons. So clearly, I mean, throwing the numbers at you, these figures are alarming, and we can't really afford to have mountains of garbage given the amount of land that we need to dispose waste. As of now, if we kind of add it up, it could actually be the size of some cities or a few cities added together. So in terms of waste management, there's really a lot of untapped potential that could be utilized, say, for composting, potential that could be utilized for resource recovery and material recycling, or potential that could be utilized for energy recovery. So a lot of it is underutilized due to various factors that we know of. I mean, the challenge on the ground is non-segregation. The challenge on the ground is informalities which are not addressed. And so, I mean, clearly with these numbers, we also know that there is an enormous scope for improvement in the area and to kind of shift to circular economy or circular systems, which are more, resource efficient. Now, if we look into various analysis and studies that have been done, there was this study by Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which kind of has, led globally this where on analysis on circular economy for various countries. It clearly says that transitioning to circular economy will result in $624 billion USD in economic benefits, and it will reduce carbon emissions by 44% in 2050 alone. And currently where we are in the wake of pandemic, we clearly know that national governments in coordination with state governments, we definitely need to develop a roadmap for institutionalizing a circular economic growth model for the nation. Now, coming to where we are in terms of circular economy, I mean, to me, it definitely is a buzzword, but what amount of work has been done from a policy perspective? Sometime in 2017, the government of India had established the Resource Panel, which was an advisory body under the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. We had a strategy paper on resource efficiency that came out in 2017. Niti Aayog pitched for transition to resource efficiency and circular economy as an economic paradigm. Again, this was a paper that had highlighted a few notable actions, most of them being formulating a national policy, establishing a Bureau of Resource Efficiency, mainstreaming resource efficiency and circular economy in existing flagship missions, pushing for more material recovery and recycling, looking into R&D and innovation. And a collation of all these efforts led to the draft National Resource Efficiency Policy that came last year in 2019, though this is not finalized yet and it was open to comments. And if we look into what was there in the draft policy, it proposed significant policy instruments like addressing regulatory gaps in implementation of waste laws, looking into landfill taxes, high tipping fees, especially for bulk generators of waste, etc. It also kind of, the major objective of this draft policy is also that once it gets finalized, it will basically push forward the agenda for resource efficiency and circular economy in the country, which means a lot of work has to be trickled down within states and cities. But as of now, if we look into where various states are, I think Goa is probably the only state in UT that has a state level policy on resource efficiency. And to start with, there's no other state in the country. Also, the draft policy said that in order to promote maximum plastic recycling, it had proposed for 100% recycling and reuse of PLET by 2025 and 75% recycling and reuse of other plastic packaging materials by 2030. Given the current scenario, it looks very, very far-fetched. Also it kind of laid down, scenarios for various other waste streams like C&D waste, how its recycling rates could be increased. So definitely, I mean, one key thing that we get into the picture is that there clearly has to be a lot of work that has to be done in the area of circular economy and resource efficiency in the country. And we clearly know that waste management is one of the key areas where significant work has not been done to push for objectives of circular economy model. And this definitely has to be stretched forward and pushed for implementation on the ground, as well as intensified and incentivized, to kind of ensure that it gets converted for also policy perspectives. What we can learn, I mean, of course, what Dr. Sodhi said, the Chinese model and the German model, which Professor Sangwan mentioned. I mean, clearly 5 key areas and 5 missing gaps need to be strengthened. One is social engineering and citizen awareness, where we really, need to kind of stitch the gaps. People need to understand what is circular economy at the first place. We need to look at systems that look into incentivizing and financing local businesses that work on circular economy. We need to have a clear roadmap to transition to circular economy. It again comes with technological innovation and policy roadmap and coordination. Browsing through the 5 areas. One, I think you all will agree with, is social engineering or changing behaviors on the ground. It's the need of the hour. Right from changing school curriculums to pushing and advocating for source segregation on the ground. We also clearly know that based on our experiences that we are consuming more. I mean, every time a product comes, we are hungry to have it on our table, but then nobody really knows the fate of it, the fate of consumption. So clearly extended consumer responsibility needs to be enforced along with extended producer responsibility. It's the need of the hour. I feel that responsible consumerism is required because it's only when we demand for sustainable products that the market and scenarios change. So definitely when we look into segregation, I feel a minimum cut of 70% and above needs to be met countrywide. A scenario where we are saying 30, 40, 50% segregation, I think we cannot sustain with it. In fact, all the models that the previous speakers talked about, they can't be put into implementation if we can't focus on segregation of resources. Secondly, incentivizing and financing. I guess the biggest hurdle here is that, how do we incentivize industry? I mean, we're predominantly more into reverse logistics and, how recycling businesses and other industries can be incentivized in a scenario where even informal sector has to pay a high GST. And how do we address and integrate informalities? So clearly cities are central to building circular economy, which means that we could look up to integrate this with the smart city mission of the country. Circular economy definitely has to be woven into it. Thirdly, all industries and businesses need to be encouraged to shift to circular economy businesses. I think we could look into the top 10 industries, which would be transportation, food and agriculture, plastics, packaging, metal, minerals, textiles, automobiles, and even, food produced or food wasted in India alone has a massive potential to be utilized, to kind of push for and adopt for circular business models. Look at bio-CNG. We know Stockholm has massively tapped into it. So what is stopping us? We know a few cities like Chennai that is kind of going strong into it, but definitely food cannot be wasted and food has to be utilized. So how do we do it? Definitely has to be kind of chalked out. And integrating circular economy across construction industry also is the need of the hour. If you look at most of our class 2 cities, I mean, they look like they're entirely under construction, and imagine the amount of C&D waste that is coming out of it. So clearly there is a resource material that is underutilized, and its utilization has to be increased and cannot happen till we look into material recovery and increasing its efficiency. Fourth and second last is technological innovation or techno innovation. Clearly, I think a simple example here would be, we talk of alternatives in plastics, but most of us don't have access to it. Only a privileged few can buy alternatives and switch to alternatives because alternatives come at a cost. So I feel we need to drive technological innovation so that We look into financial, economic, social, and environmental viability of those products, technologies, even industrial innovation that has to come into it, which means like you have to go into sustainable technological innovation. And last and the most important, a policy roadmap and coordination, which means a lot of best practices for us in India come from the ground. So we definitely need to have a bottom-up approach over a top-down approach. There are a lot of cities that are doing commendable work in terms of resource efficiency. And I think when we talk about our country or developing economies as a context, we have to relate to localization of resources. I mean, how do we on the ground understand circular economy as, and all those practices need to come into perspective and probably form a part of a wider policy into picture. So it definitely has to be bottom up and not top down. Also, we look into our waste rules. So if we look into each one of them, I think there is circularity missing in all of them overall. So we really need to look back at all our rules, revise targets, and look into what has to be done to transform into policies that reflect circular economy. And again, as I said, learning should be collated bottom up and then become a part of, circular economy. I leave with this picture, which, Dr. Sodhi also was sharing. And this is by Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And this is what we call, a butterfly diagram on circular economy, where, the backbone of it is all the processes. One of the wings is all the wet waste stream and how it has to be utilized to ensure that there's no wastage. And one end of it is the dry waste stream. So how do we ensure, that we work towards processes that makes this butterfly flap? So I think I leave you with this very interesting diagram. In terms of UN Habitat, we're working widely on a Waste-Wise Cities campaign, basically, where we are pushing cities to have better solid waste management and resource recovery by strengthening local action, raising global awareness, also working with cities to transform other cities. So it's more like replication of best practices, not locally, but also globally, which means a city in Africa could take notes from a city in India and probably become a best practice city. So that's something that we are doing on our part. And these are some of the key action areas that we are focusing at in terms of waste management and a campaign on waste-wise cities. And I'll just leave with a small thought, which is that I think in the Indian context or in a very developing context, circularity is possible because we as a society, we've always been frugal. And to me, frugality isn't bad. Being frugal is also acknowledging and knowing the importance of wealth in resources to ensure that they're not wasted. And I feel this is the base of circular economy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Swati, for very insightful perspectives for circularity, especially for India. Responsible consumerism, demanding sustainable products, non-negotiability of source segregation, special incentives for adopting circularity for business, industry-specific roadmaps. I think you covered all of that, and the key role that government plays in promoting technologies to make circular economy viable. And lastly, a roadmap for a very smooth transition from linear to circular. And you're absolutely right, circularity is missing in all our waste rules, and we need to really look at that. And as you said, circular economy is not a pipe dream. I'm sure we can reach there, and yeah, that was great. Now I have my last panelist for the evening, a very interesting panelist, Mr. Jaiprakash Chaudhary, who's the General Secretary of Safai Sena, which is a registered association of over 15,000 waste workers across 3 states in northern India. Through local leadership, Safai Sena advocates for the recognition of waste pickers and small traders as a key aspect of waste management in India and against their stigma and exclusion. Jaiprakash, in his role as General Secretary, propagates waste picker rights and their role in keeping the cities clean and green. He's an integral part of mobilizing waste pickers as a strong unit so they raise their voices and be heard. He has spoken at several national and international conferences and represented Delhi's garbage collectors at an international platform in Copenhagen. And he addressed world leaders on the importance of a kabadiwala or a rag picker or a recycler. He today works with municipalities and governments and recycles waste and creates jobs for over 700 informal waste workers working with him. So I'm going to ask him to share his perspective on what circular economy means to the people on the ground, the repairers, the refurbishers, the recyclers, who Dr. Sodhi talked about in his presentation. जयप्रकाश जी, मैं आपको आमंत्रित करती हूँ बात करने के लिए. आप सफाई सेना को रिप्रेजेंट कर रहे हैं, जो सारे हमारे कबाड़ी भाई उनको रिप्रेजेंट कर रहे हैं. तो आप अगर हमको बता सकते हैं कि सर्कुलर इकोनॉमी जो है, तो आपके लिए वो क्या मायने रखती है, प्लीज आप बताइए.
थैंक यू चित्रा जी, और सभी पैनलिस्ट को नमस्ते, और सभी लोग जो देख रहे हैं उनको भी नमस्ते. सर्कुलर इकोनॉमी का जो महत्व है हमारे जीवन में और जो हमारा काम है, सबसे पहली चीज कि नए चीज पर हमको कम निर्भरता करना चाहिए और पुराने चीज को ही उसको रिसाइकलिंग लायक बना के और उसको आगे बढ़ाना चाहिए. बिल्डिंग है जिस तरीके से कि आप देखते हैं आए दिन मकान को, जिसके पास पैसा होता है आता है, नया मकान 5 साल के बाद तोड़ के बना देता है और उस ईंट को, मलबे को यहाँ वहाँ डंप करके पहाड़ लगा दिया जाता है. हमारे पास, हमारे हिंदुस्तान के अंदर इतना IIT कॉलेज हैं, लेकिन ऐसा कुछ नहीं है कि ऐसा कोई इंजीनियर नहीं है कि उस ईंट को दोबारा रिसाइकलिंग करके और फिर से घर में ही यूज किया जाए. क्योंकि आप देखते हैं कि दिन प्रतिदिन खनन माफिया और नेताओं के मिली भगत से, आप जाइए अगर पटना शहर में आप सर्दी के मौसम में जाते हैं तो जो कि गंगा के किनारे बसा हुआ है, उसमें आपको गर्मी का एहसास होगा. जिसका कारण है कि हम लोग रीयूज नहीं कर रहे हैं, रिसाइकलिंग नहीं कर रहे हैं. वो टेक्नोलॉजी जो हमें चाहिए इकोनॉमी को बचाने के लिए, हम उसको यूज नहीं कर रहे हैं. जबकि इतने अच्छे अच्छे हमारे पास IIT कॉलेज हैं, इतने IIT हैं, सारे चीज हैं, फिर भी हम उस चीज को नहीं कर पाते हैं. जिसके कारण कि आप नए घर बनाने के लिए अगर एक घर बनाते हैं तो उसके लिए आप खनन करते हैं, बालू खनन करते हैं, आप पहाड़ को तोड़ते हैं, आप कोयला का खनन करते हैं, आप लोहा का खनन करते हैं. इस तरीके से जब आप खनन करेंगे कोई चीज, अगर आप इस तरीके का चीज को आप निकालते हैं तो खुद ब खुद नुकसान आपको ही पहुंचाता है. जैसे कि अभी कोई भी शहर में अगर आप चले जाइएगा तो इतना खनन हो चुका है, इतना खनन हो चुका है कि वहां का तापमान अभी सर्दी में भी वहां का शहर गर्म रहता है. दूसरी चीज ये है कि हम लोग लैपटॉप यूज करते हैं, मोबाइल यूज करते हैं, टीवी को यूज करते हैं, हर एक चीज को यूज करते हैं. हम ये नहीं कह रहे हैं कि आप अलग अलग कंपनी, अलग अलग मोबाइल नहीं बनाएं, अलग अलग लैपटॉप नहीं बनाएं. अगर लैपटॉप का एक चार्जर हो, मोबाइल का अगर एक चार्जर हो, तो मान लीजिए अगर एक घर में हम 4 लोग हैं और हमारे पास 4 मोबाइल है और एक चार्जर है, तो हम वो एक चार्जर से 4 मोबाइल का चार्ज कर सकते हैं. लेकिन अभी होता क्या है कि नए नए कंपनियां नई नई चीज बनाती हैं, नए नए टेक्नोलॉजी बनाती हैं और लास्ट में वो हमारे लिए ही आफत हो जाता है. जैसे चार्जर है, हर एक मोबाइल का एक अलग अलग चार्जर होता है, हर एक लैपटॉप का एक अलग अलग चार्जर होता है, जिसके कारण कि वो खराब होने के बाद वो कूड़े के हिस्से में तब्दील हो जाता है और वो इकट्ठा हो जाता है, जिसके कारण कि वो नुकसान पहुंचता है. अब जैसे आप गाड़ी ले लीजिए, गाड़ी जो हमारा है, आप चाहे वो आप प्राइवेट गाड़ी ले लें या कमर्शियल व्हीकल ले लें, कोई भी गाड़ी, सरकार एक पॉलिसी बनाया है कि 10 साल चलेगा, 12 साल चलेगा. क्यों नहीं, जब मेरा गाड़ी उस लायक और उस स्थिति में है कि उसका इंजन सही है, उसका बॉडी सही है, उसका टायर सही है, तो क्यों नहीं हम उसको रिपेयर करके अगर मान लीजिए खराब होता है तो चलाएं. लेकिन यहाँ एक टाइम का बाउंड होता है कि 10 साल में आपको खत्म करना है. अगर वो सरकार नहीं करेगा तो कंपनियां की कमाई नहीं होगा, जिसके कारण कि और कूड़ा बढ़ता है. क्योंकि जो भी गाड़ी है 10 साल 12 साल में उसके इंजन को कुछ भी नहीं होता है, उसके बॉडी को कुछ भी नहीं होता है और वो आगे 10 साल चल सकता है. लेकिन हम 10 साल पहले जो खत्म कर देते हैं तो कूड़े का अंबार लगा देते हैं, ढेर लग जाता है कूड़े का. उसके बाद हमको लोहे जैसा खनन, गाड़ी लोहे से तैयार होता है, टायर रबर का जरूरत पड़ता है. तीसरा चीज है, सबसे बड़ा महत्वपूर्ण चीज है जिसपे हम जाएंगे, कि जैसे आप देख रहे होंगे कि आज एक चलन सा हो गया है, एक चर्चे में आ गया है कि अगर घर में 4 बहू हैं तो 4 अलग अलग मिक्सी होना चाहिए, 4 अलग अलग वॉशिंग मशीन होना चाहिए, जबकि हम एक वॉशिंग मशीन को यूज करके हम 4 लोग उस चीज को, कपड़े को धो सकते हैं, अपना अपना सर्फ साबुन ला के धो सकते हैं, ताकि 3 जो हमारे बिजली खपत कर रहा है, पानी को खपत कर रहा है, और फिर वो बाद में कूड़ा बनेगा, उससे बचेगा। लास्ट में जो पॉइंट आता है कि सबसे बड़ी चीज है कूड़े के ऊपर हम बात करेंगे, जो कि हम लोग काम कर रहे हैं और कूड़े में किस तरीके का चीज आता है और क्या क्या हम करते हैं। जो कूड़ा आप लोग अपने घर से, ऑफिस से, मॉल से, जहां से भी आप हमको देते हैं, या जो जो लोग लेके आते हैं, उस कूड़े में कभी भी आप देखे होंगे, दिल्ली में जो लोग रहते हैं वो लाल किले में देखे होंगे कि कबाड़ी बाजार लगता है। यहाँ पे पूरे दिल्ली शहर के, दिल्ली के आसपास के लोग जो कूड़ा उठाने वाले लोग हैं, उसमें क्या होता है कि आपके घर में अगर एक चश्मा का एक पिन हट गया तो आप उस चश्मा को निकाल के फेंक देंगे कूड़े में। अगर आपके घर में खिलौना आ गया, चाहे खिलौना 5,000 का हो, अगर उसका एक पहिया निकल गया तो आप उसको डाल देंगे कूड़े में। लेकिन वो कूड़े वाला जब आपके घर में आता है कूड़े उठाने के लिए, तो वो सारा कूड़ा ले जाता है। पहला प्रायोरिटी और पहला जिम्मेवारी सेग्रीगेशन का होता है, तब जाके आपका रिसाइकलिंग तक मटेरियल पहुंचता है। क्योंकि अगर सेग्रीगेशन सही से ना हो तो रिसाइकलिंग नहीं हो सकता है। तो इस तरीके से पहले चोर बाजार लगता था, बहुत सारे मार्केट है जहां पे आज के डेट में भी, पहले आप देखते होंगे कि पुराने जमाने का जो रेडियो होता था, चाहे इस तरीके का टॉर्च होता था, इस तरीके का जो चीज था, वो लोग को निकलता था तो वो सही करके कबाड़े मार्केट में ले जाता था, बेचता था और अपना अर्निंग करता था। लेकिन आज के डेट में क्या हुआ, आज के डेट में सरकार उस बाजार को भी खत्म कर दिया। उसी बाजार को नहीं, वैसे वैसे हजारों बाजार हिंदुस्तान के अंदर है जिसको खत्म कर दिया गया, जो लोग की रीयूज करता था और दूसरे तक लोगों को पहुंचाता था रीयूज करने के लिए। अब रिसाइकलिंग की बात आती है, तो रिसाइकलिंग किस प्रकार का होना चाहिए? रिसाइकलिंग के लिए जब हम कूड़ा को अलग करते हैं, आज के डेट में लोगों के पास जगह नहीं है। आप देखे होंगे ये कोरोना काल में सारे लोग अपने अपने घर में थे, लेकिन फिर भी हमारे जैसे लोग, हजारों लोग, हिंदुस्तान नहीं पूरे विश्व में इस काम को करते रहा और उस कोरोना से लड़ के कोरोना को मात देते रहा। फिर भी क्या उनको नहीं, तो आज उनके पास जगह है, नहीं उनको सम्मान की दृष्टि से देखा जाता है, और ना ही कोई भी ऐसा सुविधा, चाहे वो शिक्षा की हो, चाहे स्वास्थ्य की हो, कोई भी ऐसी सुविधा नहीं है ताकि उनके पास पहुंचे। आज भी आप अगर देखना चाहते हैं तो आप हमारी बस्ती में आके देखिए कि हम लोग किस तरीके से रह रहे हैं। आप जिस खिड़की को तोड़ के घर के बाहर फेंक देते हैं, उसको हम उठा के ले जाते हैं और अपने घर में उसको रिपेयर करके लगाते हैं, क्योंकि हमारे पास पैसा नहीं होता है, और उसी से हम लोग रिपेयर करके उसको रीयूज करते हैं, लास्ट में रिसाइकलिंग करते हैं। इतना करने के बावजूद भी आज बताइए कि हजारों लाखों लोग इस तरीके के लोग हैं जो कि रिपेयर करके ऐसे बाजारों में मटेरियल को बेचता था, इस तरीके का काम करता था जिसका सारा काम छीन गया, क्योंकि जगह नहीं है उनके पास, तो वो करेंगे क्या? फिर वो कूड़ा बढ़ता है। तो फिर जब आप किसी नए चीज को बार बार काटेंगे, मान लीजिए 1 टन पेपर बनाने के लिए 17 पेड़ काटे जाते हैं, आप उस पेड़ को कूड़े में डालेंगे, आप लैंडफिल के जैसे इकट्ठा करेंगे और फिर उसमें आग लगाएंगे, तो आप एक तरफ तो अपने आर्थिक स्थिति को नुकसान पहुंचा रहे हैं, दूसरे की इकोनॉमी में जब आप पेड़ काटेंगे, आपके शहर में लाखों टन पेपर की जरूरत पड़ता है, तो आप हर जगह पेड़ काटेंगे, रिसाइकलिंग नहीं करेंगे तो किस तरीके से होगा? और आज के डेट में सबसे अगर ज्यादा जरूरत है तो रीयूज और रिसाइकलिंग का सबसे ज्यादा जरूरत है, जिससे कि रिसाइकलिंग कर सकें। उसके लिए सरकार को हर एक तरह का जगह देना चाहिए, लोगों को टूल मुहैया कराना चाहिए, ताकि किसी भी तरीके का जो भी समस्या है, जिस कार्य को हम कर रहे हैं उसको सही तरीके से रिसाइकलिंग करें। अब प्लास्टिक बनता है, ऐसा प्लास्टिक क्यों नहीं बनता है? ऐसा टेक्नोलॉजी हिंदुस्तान में क्यों नहीं है कि बनाने टाइम भी लोगों को नुकसान पहुंचता है, फिर उठा के जब फेंका जाता है, फिर हम उठा के ले जाते हैं, जब रिसाइकलिंग के लिए जाता है फिर नुकसान करता है? ऐसा प्लास्टिक क्यों नहीं बनाया जाता है कि जो ना तो पहले बनाने में नुकसान करे और ना दोबारा रिसाइकलिंग करने में नुकसान हो लोगों को? बहुत सारे लोग इस तरीके से मर जाते हैं। और ये सिर्फ प्लास्टिक की बात नहीं है, आपके सामने बहुत सारे चीज हैं जिसको कि आप देख रहे हैं कि रिसाइकलिंग होने वाला है, लेकिन आप उसको कुछ करना नहीं चाहते। तो हम यही कहेंगे कि अगर अपने इकोनॉमी को अच्छा रखना है। आप देख रहे हैं कितना तेजी से मौसम बदल रहा है। आप एक तरफ पहाड़ तोड़ रहे हैं, दूसरे तरफ कूड़ा बहुत ज्यादा कर रहे हैं, तीसरे तरफ उस कूड़ा को आप जला रहे हैं, क्योंकि आप रिसाइकलिंग का व्यवस्था सही तरीके से हिंदुस्तान में डेवलप नहीं किए हैं। जब तक वो रिसाइकलिंग नहीं होगा, उसमें लाखों लोगों का रोजगार भी जुड़ा हुआ है। और रिसाइकलिंग अगर आप नहीं करेंगे तो आप नए चीज को आप खोदते रहेंगे, चाहे वो लोहा हो, चाहे वो पेड़ हो, चाहे वो नदी हो, या कोई भी चीज हो। आप उस चीज को खोद खोद के और फिर उससे नुकसान आने वाले, आप जानते हैं कि कितना तबाही मचता है जब बाढ़ आता है, जब आप वहां के खनन माफिया नेता अपने जेब भर लेता है, जो आसपास गांव होता है वहां पे पूरा पानी आ जाता है, जल भर जाता है, और जो इंसान के घर बहुत मेहनत से अपना बनाता है और देखते देखते वो खनन माफिया के वजह से उनका घर गंगा जी में कट के गिर जाता है। तो इस तरीके से फायदा कुछ लोगों का है, नुकसान बहुत सारे लोगों का है। इससे क्लाइमेट चेंज हो रहा है। हम लोग जो काम कर रहे हैं, हकीकत यही है कि जो हमारा ये चल रहा है, इसमें सबसे अगर मेन मुद्दा है तो जो वेस्ट का काम कर रहा है, चाहे वो हिंदुस्तान का हो या पूरे विश्व का हो, उनका सबसे बड़ा महत्वपूर्ण योगदान है। लेकिन उसको सपोर्ट करना बहुत जरूरी है, क्योंकि सरकार भी सपोर्ट नहीं करता है एक तरफ, तो दूसरे तरफ समाज सपोर्ट नहीं करता। अब आप ये समझ सकते हैं, कोरोना काल में सबको सरकार ने देखा और जो वेस्ट का काम करने वाला था उनके ऊपर उनको नजर भी नहीं गया। हमको तो बहुत अफसोस, अब क्या बताएं, बोला जाता है कि बहुत अफसोस होता है कि इस तरीके के काम करने के बाद, जबकि इस इकोनॉमी में हम लोग का इतना बहुत महत्वपूर्ण योगदान है कि हम पैसा बचाते हैं, हम जगह बचाते हैं, हम जल बचाते हैं, हम जमीन बचाते हैं, रीयूज करते हैं, रिसाइकलिंग तक पहुंचाते हैं, क्योंकि जब तक आप सेग्रीगेशन नहीं करते हैं तो नहीं। आज उनके लिए क्या है, उनके लिए जगह तक नहीं है हिंदुस्तान के अंदर में, जो कि आपके लिए और आपके इकोनॉमी के लिए फ्री में काम कर रहा है। उनके बच्चों के लिए स्कूल नहीं है, उनके लिए स्वास्थ्य सुविधा नहीं है। इस तरीके का कार्य है जो हम लोग करते हैं, वो एक बहुत महत्वपूर्ण काम करते हैं। और हमारे कामों से, दिल्ली का एक सर्वे है जिसमें कि कहा गया है साफ साफ कि हम जो वेस्ट उठाते हैं, जिसको रिसाइकलिंग तक पहुंचाते हैं, क्योंकि हम 20% वेस्ट को उठाते हैं, उसको रिसाइकलिंग तक पहुंचाते हैं, जिससे 9,62,133 मैट्रिक टन ग्रीन हाउस गैस को कम करने में मदद करते हैं, फ्री ऑफ कॉस्ट में करते हैं, जिसके कारण कि शहर साफ सुथरा रहता है। और कंपनी, आप देख रहे हैं कि बड़े बड़े कंपनी का काम है पैसा कमाना, माफिया नेताओं का काम है पैसा कमाना, लेकिन वो 70% लोग वो भुक्तभोगी होते हैं जो इस चीज के लिए काम करते हैं, और लास्ट में भुक्तभोगी भी वही होते हैं। तो हम चाहेंगे कि अगर इकोनॉमी को सही करना है तो कोई भी चीज, छोटी सी चीज हो, वो छूटना नहीं चाहिए। और रिसाइकलिंग में सबसे पहले लोगों को जगह मिलना चाहिए, चाहे वो बाजार लगाने के लिए जगह हो, चाहे वो कूड़े के काम करने के लिए जगह हो, चाहे वो हमारे खाद बनाने के लिए जगह हो। तो इस तरीके का सरकार को सब चीज देना पड़ेगा, और टेक्नोलॉजी जो है उसको सही प्रारूप देना पड़ेगा। ये नहीं कि अगर हमने घर तोड़ दिया तो जंगल में जाके मलबा को फेंक दिया, हमने कूड़ा कर दिया और नया मिट्टी को, नया बालू को खोद के लाया, नया पहाड़ को तोड़ के लाया और हम अपना घर बनाया। क्योंकि हम इसको भी रिसाइकलिंग कर सकते हैं, दूसरा ईंट बना सकते हैं, दूसरा घर बना सकते हैं, तो फिर हम क्यों इस तरीके का काम करते हैं? क्योंकि हमारे कानून जो है, कानून ही कुछ इस तरीके का है कि हम लोग नया चीज को खोदते रहते हैं। तो जब तक ये इकोनॉमी सही नहीं हो सकता, जब हम सुचारू रूप से आगे नहीं बढ़ेंगे, लोगों को ध्यान में नहीं रखेंगे। आज आप इतने लोग काम कर रहे हैं, चाहे वो मजदूर लेवल का आदमी हो, आपके घर में मकान बना रहा है, वो भी वही कर रहा है, और उनको भी उतने ही जरूरत है जितना जरूरत की सब लोगों को है। तो हम कहना चाहेंगे कि जो हमारा
जयप्रकाश जी, हमारा टाइम खत्म हो गया है। धन्यवाद आपको। शायद आपके वहां से भी शायद साउंड का प्रॉब्लम हो रहा
है। सिर्फ हिंदुस्तान की नहीं जाता, आपका जूता फट गया और आपने जूता फेंक दिया तो लोग उस जूते को रीयूज करने के लिए, सही करने के और पहनता है। लोग मार्केट में बेचता है, आपके कपड़े फट जाते हैं, नए कपड़े आप फेंक देते हैं एक बार पहनने के बाद, उसके बाद भी जाके लोग उसको रीयूज करता है और रिसाइकलिंग के लिए भेजता है। इसी में अब मैं कहना चाहूंगा, फिर लास्ट में एक बार फिर से याद दिलाना चाहूंगा कि जो रिसाइकलिंग और वेस्ट का काम करता है उसका ध्यान रखें, और सरकार को भी ध्यान रखना चाहिए, जगह मुहैया कराना चाहिए। धन्यवाद।
धन्यवाद जयप्रकाश जी। बिल्कुल, कबाड़ी भाइयों का बहुत योगदान है। हमारा जो सर्कुलर इकोनॉमी है, आपके बिना तो ये सर्कुलर इकोनॉमी चलेगा ही नहीं, और यही हम पहले से बोल रहे हैं। आई थिंक ऑल ऑफ अस हैव बीन वेरी मूव्ड बाय द वेरी पैशनेट speech of Jayaprakash Chaudhary, because obviously these are the people who are working on the ground. These are our repairers, our refurbishers, our recyclers, and they build our cities. And we had seen the situation, what happened during the COVID. And I personally, though we work in partnership with Safai Sena, I am always moved to hear the kind of work they do and see personally what they do. And so thank you. We had, we had a very amazing panel discussion from where 4 completely diverse perspectives from completely different types of viewpoints that the panelists brought. I will now be taking a few questions from the audience. We don't have too much of a time, so we'll be just addressing a few questions. Samuel, if you could just, if you have collated the questions, if you could just put forward the questions to our panelists and they can address it.
So hello everyone. I have a few questions which have been collated from our audience, and the first question is addressed to Professor Sangwan. This is by Miss Mamta Jain, who is an entrepreneur and founder of the organization called Samposhan. So the question is, why is government not playing a part in sustainability, and what about EPR? So your opinions on that would be highly appreciated, sir.
It's wrong to say that government is not playing its parts for sustainability. They are playing their part for sustainability, but the answer may be the government officials are not aware about the latest thing, what can be done. Our government officials are a little bit knowing everything. They don't consult most of the time experts. If you see in the Europe, etc., there the officials, they have experts, they have university professors, they have industry experts as the advisors to them. But in India, it's not that much. Even if it is there, there are few professors in few organizations, I would say, where the words start with the Indian and that ends there. And they are either the so-called professors, airport professors, they keep on moving and they don't get the time. I think time has come now. We have to ask each and every professor, each and every industry experts to be the advisors to the government. Because one person sitting government official can't find out what is going on, latest thing in the world. So I would not say that the government is not doing, they are not doing. They are doing, but they are ignorant, I would say.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Sangwan, for this question. My next question is addressed to Ms. Swati Sambyar. This question is again asked by Ms. Mamta. So the question is, has the new NEP, which is the new education policy, incorporated anything around the idea of sustainability? So basically the question pertains to the whole idea of sustainability and getting it into the whole curriculum scenario.
Thanks, Samuel. I think, yes, it does mentions environment and sustainability broadly and kind of covers environment education. But as I'd also mentioned in my presentation, that I think we really need to broadly discuss aspects such as resource efficiency, circularity, and its perspectives also into school curriculum to make it a norm, which presently is not there. But broadly, it does covers environment and sustainability. Yeah.
Great. So Ms. Swati, there's another question which is addressed to you, and this is by Ms. Aishwarya Taluri, who is a research associate at Future Institute. So the question is, from a practical standpoint, how can one be a responsible consumer? What can we look up about a product in order to get into the whole idea of circular economy?
I think it's a very relevant question. I think in our day-to-day lives, our choices really change scenarios, right? In terms of, the West is swept through by this concept of minimalism and using less and consuming less and reducing your footprint in general. So I feel if we become conscious consumers, wherein, when we go to shop, we ask ourselves twice whether this thing is required, or in case we're disposing a product, we check that whether it is going to a formal or informal stream, and are we aware that it would be recycled, say, on a riverbank, or would it be recycled, in a formal facility? So, I mean, these are just very minuscule examples, but I feel getting to that level of awareness also, requires a lot of knowledge enhancement, which means, day to day, you question and you kind of envision your lifestyle, what it is, and how do you want to reduce your footprint. And of course, it can't happen in a day. It may take a year to a few years to a decade. And as I say, this is a journey. I mean, becoming circular or adopting a zero waste lifestyle is a journey, and it starts by a step. So I think it's important to take that step and kind of switch to a responsible consumer, which could be something as small as, having a very low plastic footprint. I mean, it's unavoidable, but trying to do so. And, when you consume something, just look at the bag of products, what it is. Will it get recycled? Will it get reused? Or will it be just get thrown away? So I think start with basics and then, take it up to a higher level. And of course, we're all there to guide. Thanks.
Thank you for that answer, Ms. Sambyal. My next question is addressed to Dr. Sodhi. So Dr. Sodhi, the question is, what are your views on the idea of planned obsolescence in the context of circular economy? This question has been asked by Kapil Chawla, who is a lawyer in Delhi.
Yeah, thank you for the question. The planned obsolescence can work. It depends on how it's implemented. One approach is to have some kind of a sharing economy. The other is to actually not have ownership of products. So the company owns the product and takes it back. There are different ways in which this has been implemented, and it can be done well. So I think that's a possibility that has a lot of potential. But the hard part is in the details. But certainly, I think that can help. So if you buy an iPhone, you own it for 5 years and then you upgrade. If that, there has to be some honesty in how the upgrade is charged. But certainly, it's a great idea. And I think people are working on models for understanding how to implement it. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. So there's one more question addressed to you, and that's probably already been asked in the chat. But for the benefit of everybody, I'd just like to repeat it once. The question was, is the existence of informal economy a barrier to accommodate DFR and DFD? I would just like you to expand a little upon those two terms and answer the question.
So the design for recycling, design for recovery, etc. See, these are design concepts that need to be developed in India. They're not. So if you buy an iPhone, and I'll stay with that as an example, you're buying something that's been designed in the West with minimal labor, and Apple has very good people who understand recycling, and they understand that if you take 1 million iPhones, you can crunch them and get the material out of it. That's not a problem. So India has an opportunity where if the design originates in India, there are ways of thinking about how an upgrade can happen. But if you keep buying stuff that comes from countries, then you're buying design concepts from the other countries. So, but at the same time, using the informal economy can be a tremendous asset for India. What we have here is a source of effort that is unparalleled in many ways. Yes, there are issues about how do they get paid? Is this really the right job? Is this a job that is sustainable, etc.? Those are answers that can be developed. But I don't think India's informal economy is a barrier. In fact, it should be considered as an opportunity. And then the design side is, let's develop designs that exploit that advantage. Thank you. I'm done with that.
All right.
Sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Sodhi.